Recruiting gurus aren't the only ones capable of telling you with absolute certainty who is the best of the best. From the Dodge Sports Desk, I'm Mike Sherman, and this is the Press Row. My guest today, columnist Barry Trammell, who figured out the best player on the OU women's basketball team long before Bobby Knight did. Columnist Jenni Carlson, who after extensive evaluations and calculations can tell you who the Thunder's best player is and who should be taking all the shots with the game on the line. And columnist John Rohde, who, as a lifelong evaluator of talent, can tell us who was the best player with an Oklahoma connection who signed on the dotted line yesterday. John, first, let's start with you in signing day. Yesterday, a day you love, a day you celebrate. John, who was the best player signed yesterday, either by OU or OSU or a kid from the state?
Well, the two that have me intrigued is Ronell Lewis from Dewar, just because he's such a great story, and that was a terrific story by Jake Trotter today. And also Timothy Flanders from Midwest City, who originally was going nowhere, then he was going to Tulsa, now he signed with K-State, and OSU got in late. His numbers are really impressive. I'm curious about those two most of anybody.
Yeah. Jenny, you went to a signing day ceremony yesterday. You were right here in the News OK studio updating us all. Who's your pick?
Well, I think a couple guys that may make a most immediate impact are Dexter Pratt up at OSU, a guy that they're looking at, maybe vying for some playing time next year. And I think Jamarcus McFarland, just because of the soap opera that he brings, is going to be interesting to see how good a defensive tackle he is for OU. Bob Stoops said yesterday he equated him to Tommy Harris and Gerald McCoy, to which I said, okay, which is he? A guy who's going to come in as a true freshman and play like Tommy Harris, or a guy who's going to have to come in redshirt? Obviously, what Tommy Harris did as a true freshman was special, but if he plays as a true freshman at defensive tackle, heck of a player for the Sooners.
Jamarcus McFarland, of course, is the defensive tackle from Lufkin, Texas, whose tale was told in the New York Times, a recruiting tale of wild parties, his mother angry about them, and that he wrote for like a term paper, and then all of a sudden he says, that was a term paper. I might have embellished a little bit of it. So if nothing else, we have a great potential fiction author coming to the University of Oklahoma to play football. Barry, who's your pick for the best player signed yesterday?
Oh, best player signed. I don't know that we'll be able to tell for 2 or 3 years. I tell you, I always keep an eye on whoever Oklahoma signs at quarterback, because the guy always tends to pan out.
Or leave.
One or the other. Or leave.
There's no middle ground.
Especially when he's not that ballyhooed. I mean, the guys the Brent Rawls, the Tommy Grady's, the Rhett Bomars don't tend to do much, but the guys that just sort of signed to fill a roster spot, Sam Bradford, Josh Heupel, Jason White, not so much, but guys not really a lot of fanfare turn out to be great quarterbacks. And Drew Allen from Texas fits that mold, and he seems to be in the same assembly line of tall, rangy, pro-type quarterbacks. So I'm going to keep my eye on Drew Allen.
Coming back to that thought, that the Sooner quarterbacks who have the most stars are the ones who fall the furthest, and the ones who maybe not as much as expected of them do the best. Is that because they get to come in and just sort of with low expectations and learn how to play quarterback at OU?
Well, I think we find out early who's the most qualified, who can handle competition, who belongs there. It just proves, Barry and Jenny, that this is just a crapshoot. We don't know for 3 or 4 years if yesterday was great for OU, average for OU, or bad for OU, or OSU, or Tulsa.
I thought you loved signing day. I really did.
You think again, my friend.
Jenny, you were there at Putnam City North when 2 different kind of recruits signed. Any way that renewed your faith in the whole signing day ceremonies?
Yeah, I went out to cover the signing of a couple guys that are going to service academies, and we had several around the state. I think there were maybe 6 or 7 all told. Had even a soccer player who's going to go play at one of the service academies. And, these guys are unlikely to be NFL stars one day, which I think a lot of these guys have designs on. Now, it happens occasionally that you get a guy out of a service academy that goes and does great things, but for the most part, these guys are going to go and they're going to learn how to be leaders in the military, and they're going to play football sort of on the side. So they're always impressive, the guys that end up at the service academies, the athletes that end up at the service academies. So Hunter Franz and Chris Jackson and all the guys and gals that sign with service academies, you tip your hat to them, because man, they're going to be leaders of tomorrow and out there on the front lines with the military. So it just happens that they're going to be playing sports while they're doing it.
And Barry, you were at Norman North yesterday, where was 2 interesting signings. One, I mean, there was a bunch of them, but one of them was Bo Blankenship, a running back, grew up in the shadow of the University of Oklahoma, and now he's going to Iowa State. And then the signing or the commitment or whatever they call it of a walk-on who may have the biggest impact on the college football landscape of anybody who had a ceremony yesterday.
Well, yeah, Bryce Easley.
In Oklahoma.
Bryce Easley's going to walk on at OU. There was no ceremony, there was no fanfare, there was no nothing. Bryce Easley could, a month from now, 2 weeks from now, tomorrow, could sign a letter of intent with anybody. He can sign with whoever he wants to. So OU does not have a scholarship for him right now, but plans to give him one next season. And I think he's going to be the OU kicker in 2009. I think Bob Stoops is sort of tired of the kicking problems he had. Sort of mediocre on kickoffs and not very good on placements at all last year. I think they're ready to give Bryce Easley every chance at the job. The thing that most impressed me was how big he is. I don't mean he's not Sebastian Janikowski big, but I mean he's big, tall, 6'2", 200 guy. He's not this little guy running around playing soccer. He's a good-sized kid that gets in the weight room and looks like he could play elsewhere on the football field.
The Sooners have done pretty well in the past with a Norman kid kicking for them. Scott Blanton, a pretty stout guy.
John Carroll was a Norman guy that was the OU kicker on the Big 71 team. So they've had Norman kickers before.